Shalom everyone, this is Shane Nelson with a Magi update. The Great Sign of the Heavens, which lasted from the 19th of August 2018 to August 31st, is now accomplished. The accuracy of the Magi transcript, which I released in a video on the 18th of August, was strikingly accurate. In the video that we put out, we listed several countries that we felt would be affected by this sign, and many of them were. Now, Whitehorse, Canada was mentioned as the closest named land area to the beginning of the aspect at midheaven, and I made a mistake. For some reason, I get my Atlantic and Pacific Oceans mixed up. I said Atlantic Ocean when I meant to say Pacific Ocean, and I also said the Juan de Fuca and Cascadia fault line that's out there in the Pacific Ocean was also a pretty important factor that I thought something could happen there, and something did. A 6.2 earthquake happened on this fault line at the start of the aspect. Now, thankfully, it was too deep to cause any real threat to people on the west coast of America, but the Ring of Fire became very active at the beginning of this sign, with over 200 larger than normal earthquakes happening in sequence along this giant fault. One of the areas drastically affected was Indonesia, which was a country listed in our transcript. They were hit with multiple earthquakes and received multiple fatalities and injuries, as well as just an immeasurable amount of property damage. The southern portion of India received floods of a biblical scale, of which over 320 people were reported dead, and once again an immeasurable amount of property damage, and at least 310,000 people have been displaced and are now homeless. The West Indies, another location which was in our manuscript, we did suspect a calamity would happen there, and sure enough, a 7.3 magnitude earthquake struck Venezuela and Trinidad, causing massive devastation. Hawaii, again listed on our transcript, was hit with record flooding as Hurricane Lane hit Hawaii with devastating winds, and it was the worst hurricane in 20 years. There was extreme flooding in Madison, Wisconsin, which received 10 to 16 inches of rain within 10 hours. And in the country of Georgia, a freak hailstorm in which entire fields were wiped out, and everything that could be destroyed was destroyed right before harvest season in Kistari and Akashani, Matani, Shaulurari, Kasiskeve, and Nesamakarili. I'm sorry, I can't say these Russian names very well, but in 20 minutes, all of the food that was ready for harvest in these particular, I guess, cities or sectors were gone in 20 minutes by freakishly large hail. Georgia was not one of the countries listed in our aspect, but it's one of those weird calamity things that you never would expect to happen, and it happened under this particular type of sign, which I was expecting there to be a sort of calamity all over the place, even though certain nations weren't listed. But I'm amazed at how many of the greatest calamities happened in the countries that we listed by reason of right ascension of the sun. Now, Madagascar, which was also named in our transcript during this aspect, was burning with mass wildfires, and by the end of the sign it was undergoing mass flooding. So they got the best of both calamities, I guess. Brazil was another country listed in the manuscript. It had a 7.2 magnitude quake that hit the border of Peru and Brazil and Bolivia. Now, Bolivia was also mentioned in the transcript. In smaller news, displaced Venezuelans feared for their lives in Brazil as racial tensions flared. South Korea, another country mentioned in our manuscript, was slammed with massive flooding. But the worst of these signs, and from what I believe to be the most prevalent and identifying factor of these three particular constellations, which represent the element of fire, was the fact that 39,947 wildfires grew out of control on every continent in the world during these dates of this sign. The fires burned with such heat and were so vast that even the International Space Station could see the smoke ascending from the Earth. The worst being in South Africa, or the southern portion of Africa, excuse me. Now, NASA released an article labeled "A World on Fire," which showcased the immense fires that burned globally during this time, which they released on August 23rd, 2018. Over 2 million acres were burned up in America, but many of the fires had broken out in America before this particular sign of the heavens actually started. Now, the Earth was indeed experiencing a birth pain during this time. Many firefighters lost their lives fighting these fires globally. During this massive event, and an untold number of God's innocent creatures perished in these flames, both young and old. All of the while, the Muslims in Africa continue their senseless slaughter of Christians and their families. Afghanistan also had a surge in violence, which was a country listed in our transcript. Many of the other countries listed in our transcript were just affected simply by wildfires. The date is now September 1st, and this particular grand sign is over, but some of the wildfires are still continuing to burn out of control, and there is still a trine aspect of Saturn. Much of the sign that happened didn't have too much of an effect on America, but the Uranus and Saturn trines are still activating these two fire signs. I'm thankful that the sun has moved out of the degrees which caused the trine, but there still could be a lingering effect, but it should get better. So let's just hope and continue to pray that, and it will get better. It will. I have faith that things will get better now that the prophetic language is now coming to an end with this aspect. Now, I guarantee you that many places throughout the world during this time were negatively affected by the prophetic nature poured out in the heavens with this. And I spoke of animals perishing in these fires. I mean, you just think about it. It's easy to be complacent with these types of things, and this was a really hard one for me. Looking back at the vast devastation that I was seeing unfolding in the news every day, and I mean, I know the majority of my viewers are from America, and this sign really didn't have much to do with America, because it started out in the Pacific, meaning the eastern part of the world was the focal point of this rising sign, and they did receive the brunt of it. Trust me. There are more signs for the future. This isn't even the worst sign, folks. This is just a piece. This is a small kind of thing. Sure, it's big. It's the biggest sign of the year. Praise God it's over. But there are very bad signs in store for the future that will have a more negative effect than what we just witnessed. So I don't really know if these videos are helpful. I don't know if anybody understands or if anybody listens, but I pray that everyone stays safe